So Dr. Harry Veryser, he is an author and an economist. He's an instructor of economics at the University of Detroit Mercy. He was the chairman of the Department of Economics and the Finance at Walsh College in Troy, Michigan. He has served on many educational and business boards. In January of '94, Dr. Veryser was appointed to the Judicial Tenure Commission of the State of Michigan by Governor John Engler. Dr. Veryser is an acclaimed author and was one of the 10 professors in the United States selected to receive the Will Herberg Award for Outstanding Faculty Service in the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. Please welcome Harry Veryser.
Okay, thank you. It's good to be back at MiCPAC. I always enjoy coming, and I'm very appreciative for all of Norm's efforts. Can you hear me well? It's coming across well. I have a PowerPoint I put up there to explain it, but I'll go through it. When we take a look at it, this is socialism versus free markets. Okay, and we get the next slide. I guess I'll signal you in that. And with that T-shirt there. Says that the whole history of has been a struggle between the two philosophers, Aristotle and Plato. And just to explain a little bit about the two, Aristotle was a realist. He was very realistic in his philosophy. Plato was an idealist. And in a way, all of these things, Islam, oh, this is what I need. That's great, thanks. Islam and Marxism and the whole thing on the left really comes down to following Plato. Because Plato wrote the first utopia that we have our hands on. And this here painting is in the Sistine Chapel. I don't know if any of you have been to Rome, or if you've been in the Sistine Chapel and you've seen this series of paintings as you go into the chapel. And it shows the two men, Aristotle and Plato. And Plato is pointing towards the ceiling in the painting. In other words, he's an idealist. Okay, and these idealists are looking to build this ideal society, which Plato described in his book, The Republic. Aristotle, on the other hand, is pointing to the ground. And he's saying, look, you've got to be realistic. Now, the relationship between the two fellows was that Plato taught Aristotle, and he taught him about the society. And if we go through, we have Plato's just society, and of course, no private property. I don't know how many of you read The Republic. This is a normal thing that's handed out to students. Normally, they teach the students Plato, but not Aristotle. Minimal family life. Plato believed that the children should be taken from the parents, and even in the more extreme forms, that the parents wouldn't even know who their children were. Now, if you want to see what it would be like, I suggest you get the book 1984, which when I can, I set it to all my students to read. And if you want to read The Republic, what it's like to live in that, read 1984. Or get the movie. The older movie is much better than the newer one. Okay, education would be in the total hands of the state. It would be run by a government, by enlightened guardians, read that the elite, who would be the most capable, and they would run the society. And the best book written on this was written by a Russian scholar, actually a mathematician, who's well known, a colleague of Solzhenitsyn. His name is Igor Shafarevich, and he traces the history of socialism right from Plato and Aristotle through the Middle Ages to the present day. Okay? Now, this was the contours of socialism. All socialists and all of these movements go back, one or another emphasizes more or less it, but the abolition of private property, okay, the abolition of the family, the abolition of religion, and equality or everything in common. And Aristotle said to Plato, look, teach, this is not going to work. Okay? Now, Aristotle, his philosopher, is a student who's affected very much. And we, by the way, live in an Aristotelian society. the American Constitution is Aristotelian. And Aristotle said, look, what you have to have in government is constitutional government and a balance of the various ruling groups and checks and balances. Okay? And in his book, The Politics, much more realistic. And he said this, he denounced communism of the ruling elite, advocated by Plato. Aristotle, very, very firm in the support of private property. He said that if you have public property, you're going to have conflicts. He said private property is best left to man's nature. And notice now the difference. Aristotle is arguing the nature of the human person. Plato is arguing this ideal. Okay, so Aristotle is saying on one hand, this is realistic, this is the way people are. Plato is saying this is the way people should be. Okay, that's why it appeals to students. The students are naturally idealistic, and they're presented with these various utopias, of which Islam is one. Okay, and they're drawn into this. As they get older, they do what? They start becoming more realistic and saying, well, you know, this was beautiful, this utopia, this isn't obviously going to work, and they become Aristotelians or Republicans or conservatives. Okay? Aristotle said it is better that property should be private, but the use of it common. In other words, like Henry Ford, the factories are private, but the use of it is to make cars for what? For the general population. Okay? Now, if we put them on a continuum between state control and private enterprise, okay? If any of you probably had a course in physics when you were in high school, and they took a magnet, and they had the filings, and you saw it attached to one pole, they are different. So what's happening is you have difference of degree, and then you have difference of kind. Now, when I teach my students, I say, look, here's the difference. Okay, we're all physical animals, okay? But there's a difference in kind, because we have reason. So you get to a certain point, it changes from difference of degree to difference of kind. And what is the difference? The difference is private property and the free market. So you only really have maybe 4 or 5 countries that are absolutely communistic or socialistic. Why? Because they have suspended the market. Okay, so Sweden has a market. China has a market. Russia has a market. Okay, why did they do that? Because the ideal didn't work, and they had to switch to that. Okay, and so you can go in between the differences in state control, but you can go to the private enterprise at the one hand, and we talk in this two extremes: Hong Kong, Switzerland, United States to some extent. Okay. That you can go into highly regulated economies, even though they have a market. China is still run by an elite, but they don't try to do central planning as much. They still rely on the marketplace. Okay? Now, these are the arguments that Aristotle had for private property. He says, number one is there's no incentive. Everything, and I remember one day I tried to, it was an April Fool's joke of my class, and this class started at April Fool's Day. So I made up a syllabus, and I said, well, how are we going to mark the kids? I said, what we're going to do is we're going to take all the points that everybody earns, and then we're going to divide it by the number of kids in the class, and everybody will get that mark. And I deadpan-handed it out as if I was serious. And one guy said, well, if it's going to depend on that, why work? Okay? And one lady in the front was an older lady, said, Professor, this is an April Fool's joke. And I said, yes, and here's the regular syllabus. All right? I never give group projects. You give a group project, you have one person does all the work, and everybody else comes in at the end of the class and argues why they should get an A when they didn't contribute. That's the problem. There's no incentive. Okay? Care. That which belongs to everybody belongs to nobody, and nobody will care for it. If you go to a socialist country, what do you see? You see dilapidated buildings, dilapidated power systems. I mean, what's wrong in Venezuela? Well, nobody owns the electric power company. So if something goes wrong, so what? It's not mine. Okay? Order. Private property does give order to society. And, of course, generosity. And remember, there is no charity unless there's the principle of sacrifice. You have to make a decision to help someone else. Okay? Love is what? Is the concern for the other person's good. Well, you might have to sacrifice or put your own good aside for a bit to help the other person. It's not coerced. It can't be coerced. Okay? Okay, again, we talk about individualism versus collectivism as the two things. Okay, and it gives the various parts. Aristotle, very much individual. Plato, very much collectivistic. Okay? Now, I make my students memorize, and they're going to have their test on Tuesday. They have to memorize what is socialism and what is free markets. I don't quite like the word capitalism because it was a Marxist term, but I like the word free markets. And my students have to know. They say, look, you're going out, you're listening to all these people, they're telling you all sorts of stuff, but they're not telling you what it is. You've got to know what it is. You want to be that way, fine, but you got to know where it is. You got to know where it came from. Socialism is an economic system, okay, in which the factors of production are owned by the public and supposedly operated for the welfare of all. And so they would own the factories, railways, mines, other businesses, okay? It's a command economy. In other words, the market does not control production. What controls production is the Central Planning Board, as envisioned by Plato. The most extreme forms are Cuba, North Korea, the former Soviet Union, former China. They had to switch. Okay, you have to understand the whole thing was coming apart. I read the memoirs of Gorbachev, and he talks about, they made, for example, they made so many crankshafts and not enough engine blocks, they couldn't coordinate the production. That's their major problem. Okay? The definition, again, is ownership and administration of the production and distribution of goods. Okay? There is not private property. It's a system that's owned and controlled by the state. Okay? Capitalism is a system in which the means of production are privately owned and operated for a profit. Okay? Again, under the market, you have free will. People are free to express themselves. They don't have to go through the central committee or the bureaucracy to get things done. Okay? These are the characteristics of a free market economy. Private property, freedom of choice, competition, and limited government. Okay? This is another thing where the capitalism is upheld by free markets, private property, and rule of law. Okay, a market system, the resources are directed by the allure of profits. Government only tries to make some competition, that there's some competition, and provide roads or public goods. And some people will be even more extreme, say toll roads, etc. Okay, these are the two models. And you take a look, this is what socialism is. The factors of production are owned by government activity. Okay, I'm moving pretty quickly, but I've given permission to Norm and to the people to download this and send it to all of you. Okay, so you should get this. I think that's possible to do, Norm? Okay, so you can take that and it gives you the various things. So when you talk with your young youngsters who buy into it, say, you know what you're talking about. You know what it is. Have you read 1984? Okay, again, the traditional economic systems, command system. We live in a mixed system. Although it's still free market, it's still capitalistic because you still have the free movement of prices and allocation. Okay, this is again the number of different ones. Now, most economies are mixed. In other words, government intervenes, and there's two types of mixtures. There's one is the welfare state and crony capitalism. And I think my previous speaker, Senator Colbeck, will tell you all about crony capitalism and the role of lobbyists, which promotes a mixed economy. The welfare state is another one. That goes back to Mr. Bismarck in Germany. He's the father of the welfare state. From there came Fabianism, progressivism, and the social justice crowd. Social justice is another one of these utopias. Nobody really knows what it is. It's unfortunately taken in a lot of religious people because it has the word justice. But it's an Orwellian concept. Okay, crony capitalism, this is Warren Buffett, where people use the political system, the lobbyists, to do what? To steer things in their favor. Okay, Buffett was opposed to it, but surprisingly, he's very much endorsing the left-wing candidates. I don't know what it is with these wealthy people, but they have this idea of bringing about some kind of utopia. Okay, now the problem with this is the command system. Now I go through a much longer lecture on this. This is the centrally planned economy of Russia, which has now collapsed. Okay, the problems with central planning. This is the problem. Why doesn't it work? Okay? I guess somebody's taking a picture of me, or there's something going on back there. All right? The problem with it is it doesn't have a price system. There's no price mechanism to guide resources. And therefore, what happens is you're running into all kinds of glitches and problems with supply and demand. Now, this is the argument that they cannot overcome. This is Hayek's argument. And he argues that no human mind, and this is the problem with the central planning, no human mind can comprehend all the knowledge which guides the actions of society. He says it's too dispersed. The knowledge is too dispersed and it's too much of particular circumstances. That's why the ideal does not work. Okay? He said knowledge is diffuse, not concentrated. It's not knowledge in particular circumstances. And you don't know what the future is going to be. In other words, how can you plan an economy when you don't know what the inventions will be? I mean, if you take a look at this I'm holding in my hand, or that computer, when I was going through college, nobody knew that was coming about. It came about through the spontaneous order, and so you don't know what new inventions will come about, or new inventions will be there. That's the problem of knowledge. Okay? Hayek then, and his use of knowledge in society, says, look, it's not going to work because the bureaucracy will never know what's happening. They're up here, too far away from the point of action. And the problem is, the society gets into trouble. Again, he said, the task of the central planner is impossible because they cannot gather enough information to understand the best options. So most socialist economies are what? They're inefficient. Why? Because the people who are doing the planning have no conception where they're going. They're flying in the dark. Okay? What happens with socialism? Nobody wants to take any risk. The country's best people leave. As you notice, even in the United States, what's happening? Who's really expanding? Florida and Texas. More incentives, leaving New York and all the rest of California and all the rest of the states. Okay? The advantages of the free market are economic efficiency, economic growth, freedom, and more invention. Now, this is the statistics that back it up. These come from the Veryser Institute, and they also come from the Heritage Foundation. The least free, if you take a look at it, the least free, okay, is that you have 1.5% economic growth. The most free, 3.5% economic growth. So if you take a look at economic growth, it happens where? In the free economies. Okay, this is incentive. This is the number of inventions being done. If you'll notice, this is where you have the most patents being filed. Again, it follows what? The freest economy. Okay, this is an index of economic freedom. Still, the United States, one of the most free. China has kind of an economic freedom, provided you don't touch the central command. Okay, this is Europe. Germany, England, the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries are more free. The southern countries tend to be more controlled. Okay, this is the Mideast. Notice that the only place there that you have real economic freedom is the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and to some extent Lebanon. Okay, the rest are very totalitarian, and not by accident, also very much Islamic. Okay, this is the economic freedom. About half the countries are moderately free. Most, the other half are repressed or unfree. Okay, this is the United States method. By 1999, we were pretty much at the top. This statistics ends in 2013. I think with President Trump, his repeal of regulations, whatever else, what's happened is we're coming back on economic freedom. Okay, the United States has fallen between 2000 and 2013. I think no thanks to the Bush and Obama administrations. I would argue that when you have liberal Republican administrations, establishment, they tend to go towards unfreedom. I mean, remember, it was the administration of Richard Nixon that destroyed the gold standard. Okay, it was the administration of these liberal Republicans who wreaked a lot of problems on the United States. Okay, this is economic growth. This compares North Korea and South Korea. Notice that in 1952 they were pretty much equal, but all of a sudden South Korea started taking off, and if you fly over the two at night, there's no lights in North Korea, plenty of lights in South Korea of the economic growth. There's the per capita GDP. You can see the most free have the highest per capita GDP, and the least free at the bottom, the blue lines and the purple lines, hardly any growth in per capita GDP. Okay, the relationship between economic culture and income level, and you can see as the economic culture is much better, as you have a higher income level. You have the US, Switzerland, and Hong Kong. Okay, life expectancy. This is what we're all kind of interested in, right? Life expectancy, much higher in free societies. Much higher in free societies. Those of you taking statistics, you can notice the correlation that's there. But the freer societies have higher life expectancy. That's objective. It's not a matter of opinion. We can measure it. Okay, this is corruption. At one level, you have as they're freer, less corruption. And I remember, I think it was, I read one time when I was young, Robert Walsh of the Birch Society was writing, and he said, governments are always corrupt. The question is how much corruption do you want? More government, more corruption, less government, less corruption. Okay, this is income. Again, free societies' income is much greater. And prosperity, again, these are the statistics proving it. Much, much greater freedom and prosperity. In fact, if you can argue it, this is the entrepreneurial dynamism. Aristotle said incentive. Okay, well, guess what? The more inventions, the more patents, the more changes, technological advancements are in free societies. Not unusual. Okay, the advantages of a free market system are economic efficiency, economic growth, and free markets. This is the innovation. I just use this in class all this, and I advise everybody to read 1984 to buy it for your youngsters. And so, in the conclusion, I'll just say this: is that while Islam and communism, because they're both, by the way, utopian operations, while they promise utopia, they deliver hell on earth. Well, the other people don't promise utopia and say, let's just be realistic. The Aristotelians say, let's be realistic. It delivers what? It delivers the goods. Okay, so when you go on a level, what happens is you look at the realistic thing, you find out that these are false promises. Okay? I would very much, there's only one government program I'd like to see us do. I'd like to see most American college professors have to spend a summer in Venezuela or one of these things, okay? So I'm open to questions. If any of you have any, I don't know how much time we have. I'll be glad to answer them. Yes, miss.
Yeah, what do you do when 90% of the colleges are teaching socialism to young people?
Well, it's only in the liberal arts colleges. If you go into engineering, or nursing, or medicine, or business, you find the number of socialist professors much, much less. And so people ask me, I'm sending my kid to a liberal arts college, well, where's the best place to go? I tell them, look, tell them to stay away from liberal arts colleges, because it's really not liberal arts that they're teaching, it's propaganda. Most of these courses are absolutely worthless, in my opinion. They're not going to prepare kids for jobs. And so I asked them, I said, well, if your kids in the hard sciences, or in engineering, or even economics. I mean, most times if I look for conservatives, I look for them in the economics department. Okay? Tell them to stay away from, for the most part, the philosophy they're teaching is not philosophy. It's propaganda. So I would say you're going to get propaganda education in most liberal arts colleges. Just stay away from it. Now there are good liberal arts colleges. Hillsdale, Thomas More, there's a number of good places you can send the kids. But I would say get degrees that are actually learning something, and stay out of the propaganda classes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is your thoughts on economic integration that the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement has written into it already?
Well, the problem with it is a lot of this stuff is not really free market. It's planned economies, and it has all the dangers of economic planning. The EEC, Rebke and Mises, who actually, Rebke was the guy who pulled Germany out, free market economist. He said that it's nothing but a mercantilistic scheme. That's what he called the EEC. And so what you're dealing with, how much do I have?
1 minute.
1 minute. What you're dealing with is a planned economy, and it generally turns out to be a planned mess. The other big problem is that there is no country that has embarked on a system of inflation that has not lost its manufacturing base. One of the things that we economists know, I've done a study of Rome, Turkey, England, Spain. The minute they start inflating the currency, they lose their manufacturing base. Now, we were actually exporting more stuff than we were importing prior to the breaking of the gold standard. It was Mr. Nixon who broke the gold standard. It's Mr. Johnson. So I call them the emperors Nixon and Johnson. And it's not by accident that from the time of the breaking of that gold standard, that all of a sudden we switched from being a net exporter of goods to a net importer of goods, and we started losing our manufacturing base. Okay. I see President Trump may want to invite Judy Shelton to the Federal Reserve Board. She's excellent. You should support that. She believes and understands the gold standard. I read her books. They'll go nuts before they'll do that, but we have to restore one of the things we have to do is restore that standard. Otherwise, we'll continue to lose. Thank you.
Fascinating.